There is perhaps no more cruel test of modern life than the moment you find yourself completely alone with your thoughts. Not the romantic solitude of a sunset walk, not the chosen retreat of meditation, but that raw, unfiltered confrontation with the person you've spent your entire life trying to avoid meeting. You tell yourself you fear loneliness. You construct elaborate stories about needing human connection, about the pain of isolation, about the unbearable weight of silence. But the truth is far more unsettling, far more profound than this surface narrative you've created. The truth is that loneliness reveals what we spend our lives trying to hide. The stranger living inside our own skin. The person we might have become if we hadn't learned to perform, to please, to perfectly mirror what others expected of us. That raw, unedited version of yourself that emerges when there's no audience to perform for, no role to play, no mask to wear. We flee from solitude, not because we need others, but because we cannot bear to meet ourselves. We fill every moment with noise, distraction, the endless scroll of digital connection, because in the silence something far too authentic begins to stir. This pain is not new. It has always been present, disguised under endless entertainment, compulsive productivity, and the desperate need to be needed. The truth is that loneliness reveals what we spend our lives trying to hide, the person we actually are, beneath all the stories we tell about who we think we should be. This is where Søren Kierkegaard comes in, the Danish philosopher who understood that our deepest suffering often signals our greatest opportunity for authentic existence. For Kierkegaard, what you call loneliness is not a problem to be solved, but a spiritual alert, a call to authenticity that most people spend their entire lives ignoring. Kierkegaard wrote about the sickness unto death, but he wasn't talking about physical mortality. He was describing the despair of living as someone you're not, the slow spiritual death that comes from never actually meeting your authentic self. For Kierkegaard, this is not tragedy, but the necessary prerequisite for becoming a genuine individual. In his view, most people exist in what he called the crowd, living according to external expectations, social norms, the comfortable consensus of what constitutes a good life. But authentic existence, true selfhood, can only emerge when you're stripped of these external supports and forced to confront the fundamental question: who are you when no one is watching? The anxiety you feel in solitude is what Kierkegaard called the dizziness of freedom. The overwhelming realization that you are responsible for creating meaning, for choosing who you become, for authoring your own existence. This is terrifying precisely because it's true. When the distractions fall away, when the noise subsides, you're left with the most fundamental human responsibility, the task of becoming yourself. For Kierkegaard, this discomfort in solitude is not something to medicate or avoid. It's the birth pang of authentic selfhood. It's the moment where you stop living according to the script others wrote for you and begin the dangerous, exhilarating work of writing your own. But this process is not smooth. It requires radical honesty about who you've been pretending to be, the courage to disappoint others' expectations, and the willingness to sit with the uncertainty of not knowing who you are beneath all the roles you play. If you have made it this far, it is because something in you is tired of running from yourself. And perhaps, just perhaps, you are ready for the truth. Kindly hit the like button so others can find this video. While Kierkegaard makes us look inward with reverent anxiety, Friedrich Nietzsche invites us to embrace solitude as the forge of personal power. For Nietzsche, your discomfort with being alone isn't a spiritual crisis. It's evidence that you've allowed others to define your worth, to shape your values, to determine what you believe about yourself. Nietzsche had little patience for what he called herd mentality, the tendency to find identity through group membership, social approval, or collective beliefs. He understood that elevated minds, those capable of genuine self-creation, must learn to find their center within themselves, not in the opinions of others. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe, Nietzsche observed. Your fear of solitude is actually fear of discovering your own strength, your own capacity for self-direction, your own ability to create values rather than simply inheriting them. For Nietzsche, authentic individuals are those who can say yes to themselves without needing external validation. This requires what he called amor fati, love of fate, the ability to embrace your own existence so completely that you would choose to live it exactly as it is, again and again, for eternity. But this strength demands sacrifice. It means giving up the comfort of belonging, the safety of consensus, the warm feeling of being understood by others who share your limitations. It means accepting that your deepest insights, your most authentic expressions, may be met with incomprehension or hostility. Nietzsche understood that most people would rather suffer the familiar pain of self-betrayal than risk the loneliness of self-affirmation. But for those willing to pay this price, solitude becomes not a burden but a luxury. The space where you remember who you are when you're not trying to be what others need you to be. There is a point where Kierkegaard and Nietzsche meet. Both knew that authentic selfhood is impossible without the willingness to stand alone, to face the void of undefined existence, and to create meaning from the raw material of your own experience. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. But there is something even deeper happening here. The reason solitude feels so threatening isn't philosophical, it's psychological. From the moment you were born, your survival depended on maintaining connection with others. You learned, often unconsciously, to read faces, to adjust your behavior, to become whoever others needed you to be. This early conditioning created what we might call an external reference system, a way of knowing yourself that depends entirely on feedback from others. You learn to gauge your worth by how others responded to you, to measure your value by how much you were needed, wanted, appreciated. The brutal realization is that this system, which once kept you safe and connected, now keeps you trapped in a prison of performance. You've become so skilled at mirroring others' expectations that you've lost touch with your own authentic desires, preferences, and values. In solitude, this external reference system fails. There's no one to please, no role to play, no performance to maintain. What emerges in this space is the echo of absence, the realization that you've been living as a reflection of others rather than as yourself. This creates what psychologists call internal dissonance, the uncomfortable recognition that the person you present to the world and the person you actually are exist in different dimensions. And as paradoxical as it may seem, this dissonance is not something to be avoided at all costs. It's a sign, a symptom, a message that something in you is ready to stop hiding. The transformation of loneliness into solitude does not happen by magic. It requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own presence, your own thoughts, your own unedited experience of being alive. The first step is radical acceptance, not of loneliness as comfortable, but of yourself as worth knowing. This means creating internal space for all the parts of you that you've learned to hide. Your anger, your sadness, your desires that don't fit neatly into social categories. In loneliness, we are victims of our own avoidance. In solitude, we become masters of our own company. The difference between loneliness and solitude lies in this. Loneliness is rejection of what is. Solitude is acceptance of what is and curiosity about what might be possible. This transformation requires what we might call internal listening, the ability to hear your own thoughts without immediately judging them, to feel your own emotions without rushing to fix them, to sit with your own uncertainty without demanding immediate answers. But beware of the subtle yet powerful enemy in this process, the tendency to turn even solitude into another performance, another role to master. True solitude isn't about becoming someone who's comfortable alone. It's about discovering who you are when you stop trying to become anyone at all. Those who master this art of authentic presence are those who learn to differentiate between the voice of their conditioning and the voice of their deeper wisdom. They develop what we might call internal authority, the ability to trust their own experience, even when it contradicts what others expect them to feel, think, or want. It is at this point that solitude transforms from something you endure into something you cherish. Not as an escape from life, but as a return to life, to the person you were before you learned to be someone else. And this is precisely what leads us to the great tragedy of our time, the endless flight from self-encounter. People fill their days with constant stimulation, their phones with endless connections, their schedules with compulsive productivity, all to avoid the terrifying possibility of meeting themselves. We live in a world that has perfected the art of distraction. Social media offers us endless opportunities to compare ourselves to others, to perform our lives for an invisible audience, to lose ourselves in the drama of other people's existence. Work becomes not just labor, but identity. Not just activity, but escape from the question of who we are beneath what we do. Even our relationships often serve this function. We choose partners not because we love them, but because we need them to tell us who we are, to reflect back an image of ourselves that we can tolerate. The cost of this avoidance is profound. You end up like a beautifully decorated house that is completely empty inside, impressive from the outside, hollow at the core. You know how to perform success, but you've forgotten how to feel satisfaction. You know how to be needed, but you've lost the ability to simply be. The turning point comes when you realize that running from yourself is more exhausting than facing yourself. When the energy required to maintain all these distractions becomes more painful than the discomfort of simply sitting with who you are. Here's what Kierkegaard and Nietzsche both understood. Your relationship with solitude is ultimately a choice. You can continue to fear it, to flee from it, to fill every quiet moment with noise and distraction. Or you can choose to see it as an invitation, an opportunity to meet the person you've been avoiding your entire life. You can continue living as a reaction to others' expectations, measuring your worth by external standards, finding your identity in roles and relationships. Or you can choose the more difficult but infinitely more rewarding path of self-authorship, of creating meaning from your own experience, of finding your center within yourself. This choice requires courage. The courage to disappoint others, to stand alone, to trust your own judgment even when it conflicts with popular opinion. It requires the willingness to be misunderstood, to be seen as strange or difficult, to risk the loneliness of authenticity. But I assure you, those who learn to transform loneliness into solitude never accept crumbs again. They never settle for relationships based on need rather than choice, for work that slowly kills their soul, or a life that looks impressive but feels empty. They discover something profound, that the person they were afraid to meet in solitude is actually the person they've been waiting to become their entire life. And now I want to hear from you. Write in the comments what you have learned about yourself in this video. You don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes even an honest question is a great start. Sharing your reflection can help others who are also on this journey. If this conversation touched you, if something inside you awakened, subscribe to the channel. Here we don't provide ready-made formulas or easy shortcuts. We offer awareness, clarity, and provocation. Keep watching. The next step is important.